Today we're taking junk mail catalogs and turning them into sketchbooks for mixed media collage. With a few modifications, they're a perfect way to try new-to-you techniques and art supplies. I'm Drew Steinbrecher, and welcome to my channel. Please subscribe for more collage and gel plate tips. So, a while ago I found this really great sketchbook. It's perfect for wet media like acrylic paint and markers, and old standbys like colored pencils and oil pastels. It handles glue really well, and I don't feel it's super precious. You know, you spend money on that fancy sketchbook with the great paper and a hard cover, and then you're afraid to use it because you don't want to mess it up. So, where did I find this perfect sketchbook? In the mail. Yup, that's right, it's junk mail. These little catalogs that show up in the post are perfect little books for mixed media collage. They're small, manageable, and have a few pages so you can finish one in no time. So let's talk about how to use these little guys. It does require some prep. The paper weight isn't ideal for wet media, so we'll need to make them thicker. We'll need to glue every other page together. Open the book to the third page. Add scrap paper underneath this page to protect the pages underneath. Start by adding glue to the page on the right side. Then grab both pages and lift them up to join them together. Then lay it back down and use an old card or something similar to press the pages together and remove any air bubbles. Then continue gluing the pages together in the same manner through the rest of the book. You'll glue every other page together. When you're finished, each page in the book will be thicker. Your junk mail catalog will probably have glossy pages, so you'll need to gesso them to accept the wet media. Add scrap paper under both pages to protect the rest of the book. Then grab your gesso and a brush and start adding the gesso. You probably will need to do 2 or 3 applications. Just let each layer dry before adding the next. How thick you want the gesso is up to you. I usually do 2 layers. Once the gesso is dry, grab your art supplies. I usually use acrylic inks, markers, pastels, pencils, everything. I start just by adding something to the page to get over the fear of the blank page. Here I'm using non-water soluble pencil. From there I usually start adding color. In this case I'm going to stick to cool colors. I don't have a plan, I'm just doodling and making marks. Most of this will be covered up in the end, so I'm not worried at this point. I do know from experience that the marks I make on the edges of the page might show up in the final piece, so that's about the only thing I'm considering at this point. And these alcohol markers are great as they don't smudge when they get wet, but they do smell really bad, so use them sparingly. I like these Neocolor 1 crayons as they're non-water soluble and won't smear when I add paint over the top of them. These Inktense pencils are awesome since you can activate them with water and they essentially become watercolor. But they don't reactivate when you go back over them with water. They're really cool. Next, I usually do a layer of acrylic inks, which I add using a silicone brush. Again, I'm sticking to cool colors. I am going to add some pink and orange for some interest, but not a whole lot. Kind of like adding spice when you're cooking. Next, I'll add some random marks using an acrylic paint marker. Yeah, it's pretty messy at this point, but I'm not worried. I'm going to knock this back a bit with some opaque paint. If you get to the point where the page is messy, then this is a great way to tame it. Just use a paint that's more opaque so it covers the layers. Pressing with the paper removes some of the paint to reveal hints of the layers underneath, which adds texture and depth. Now it's time to add the first layer of collage. I gathered a group of papers from my stash that are in the same color palette, and I start cutting them up. I like straight edges in my work, so I use scissors and X-Acto knives and rulers. If you like to tear your collage papers up, then do that. You do you. From here I start arranging the collage pieces. I am thinking about composition at this point, but I'm not going to be too fussy with it. I'm mostly looking for what will make interesting backgrounds, as most of this will be layered over. Once I'm satisfied, I glue down the paper. I usually use glue stick for collage papers that are not tissue paper or something similar that's thin. For thinner papers, I use matte medium. I'm going to knock it back again using the white opaque paint. Then press it with scrap paper to remove some of the wet paint. My mixed media collages are built by creating a series of layers, then knocking them back using opaque paint, usually white. It usually alternates between layers of wet media, then collage. I don't really know what to do next, so I grab some alcohol ink and throw that on there because why not? I know when I get to this point, it's time to start wrapping this up. By the way, I have a free online class that explains how I collage in children's board books. I give you all the tips and tricks for using these perfect little books for collage. The link is below. At this point, I know I'm near the end, which means these final layers will be important to the overall composition. So I need to pay attention to what I'm doing. I start by adding collage papers that I've made using different kinds of tissue papers. I've selected a series of papers in the same cool color palette. Here I'm trying different papers in different locations to see how they interact with the layers below. I'm also looking for contrast. These pieces of paper from a black and white wall calendar will work nicely. You You can see here I'm moving these elements around the page to see how they're going to activate the negative space around them, as well as how they interact with the other elements across the spread. Since I'm near the end of the piece, I need to start considering the final composition. The tissue allows the background of the paper to disappear and for the mark to come forward when I glue them down. I use matte medium to glue down the tissue. I first make the piece of tissue wet using water, then add the matte medium, then pick up the piece, lay it down, then brush over top of it with more matte medium. You can also add the matte medium to the page first, then lay the collage piece on top, which I sometimes do. I like when elements go across the spread. It helps activate the entire piece. Here you can see I lift the page to be sure that the collage piece fits nicely in what's called the gutter of the book, or the center of the spread where the folds are. The negative space in the bottom of the spread needs to be activated in some way. So in other words, there needed to be a design element that interrupted that space. You can see here I'm trying to figure out exactly where that piece goes. I could keep going, but I had to stop at some point, so I just picked a spot and glued it down. When you're finished, you'll need to trim the book. I like to put a cutting mat underneath the pages and use a metal ruler and an X-Acto knife to trim. If you don't have a cutting mat, then just use a piece of chipboard from the back of an old pad of paper. Place it under the page you are working on and cut from the back. A metal ruler helps keep it straight and prevents you from cutting into the page by accident. You'll also need to prevent the pages from sticking together when the book is closed. You can use wax medium or rub a candle over top like I do. Mine is just an old birthday candle. And there you go, you've got a cool little sketchbook made from a junk mail catalog. Don't forget to check out my free board book collage class. The link is below. And again, thanks for watching, and please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more gel plate and collage tips. See you next time.